Thank you for listening to this Podcast One production, available on Apple Podcasts and Podcast One.
Welcome into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm Tim Dennison for Dave Schrader. Dave is on the road, and I hear he's trying to fly back into the Twin Cities on this Sunday. Oh, Dave, good luck to you. Although we have warmed up a little bit, we just went through 3 straight days of ungodly winter weather in the middle of spring. Tip of the hat to Prince. Yes, sometimes it does snow in April, and it came down in buckets. I think we had something like 9.5 inches, at least where we live up north here. Down south where Dave lives, south of the city. It's not like I'm giving away his location or anything, but they got it worse. So good luck, my friend, trying to get into the cities. You should land okay, and you should be okay. But Dave's been on the road for weeks and weeks and weeks trying to balance all kinds of things. Family and TV show and 2 radio shows, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but he'll be back with us on True Crime Tuesday. Speaking of, if you haven't signed up for True Crime Tuesday yet, shame on you. You could do so by just going to darknessradio.com, clicking on the banner with Scully in his little fedora and top trench coat or whatever you want to call it, and join us for just $5 a month. You get the best in true crime radio, and you get Dumb Crime Stupid Criminals on top of it, which sometimes may not be the best in true crime radio, but it sure is funny. That's all waiting for you over there. If you click on that banner and just follow the link, there is 2 years of true crime radio sitting over there that is just waiting for you to listen to, plus a brand new episode every Tuesday. And let me tell you, there is some spine tingling and chilling radio waiting for you over there as well. And I can't wait for you to check it out. Be sure to go over to darknessradio.com and click on that banner and make sure you check out everything that's waiting for you over there. Also, you can check out the events page over there at the brand new, reorganized, restructured, redone darknessradio.com and see where we're going to be throughout the year. Michigan Paracon's coming up in August, and we want to make sure that you join us there. It's one of the largest paranormal conventions in the country, and Dave and I will both be there this coming August. Make sure you join us out there as well. It's going to be a heck of a deal. Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, beautiful country in the summertime. And somebody's birthday's around that time, too. I can't imagine whose, but maybe you can buy that person a drink. I'm just saying. I'm not saying it's me, but that person may like a birthday drink around that time of year. Be sure to come out to Michigan Paracon and celebrate. I also happen to know that the lovely Mally Fox will be out there as well, so it's kind of like a little mini Darkness radio reunion that time of year out there at Michigan Paracon. You can get your tickets by clicking on the banner at darknessradio.com/events and get your tickets and join us out there in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And if you want to find out where we're going to be throughout the world for these paranormal expeditions, you can click on darknessradio.com/events or go to darknessevents.com and see where we're going to be. I hear as well on the grapevine that there is a new paranormal, a new yet old. Everything is retro these days, you know. Everything is kind of retrofit. There is a new old event, or an old new event, that is coming back in March on the East Coast. I can't tell you anything about it yet, but you'll find out about it soon enough. That's all I can do. All I can do is tease you kids on a Sunday. Isn't this fun? But in March of this year, out on the East Coast, an event is coming back, and let's just say that yours truly will be out there, and maybe Dave as well. Huh? That's all I can do, but I'm excited about it. It's in March this year. We'll let you know more about it as details come out. Let's get to today's program, shall we? Because it's an exciting one. Today we're going to delve into connecting with your mind and body through your soul, and it has to do with the limitless soul. Hypno-Regression case studies into past, present, and future lives with our guest, Bryn Blankinship. Bryn is a second-generation hypnotherapist, international instructor, and author, and has been very gracious to take some time away from a workshop that she's doing this weekend. She served on the original board of the Newton Institute as Director of Membership from 2005 through 2012, and she's been featured in several documentaries and radio interviews on the subject of past lives and life between lives. We'll be talking about that today. Bryn is also the founder of Hypnotic Solutions, Hypnosis Center, and Executive Director of the Braith Center. You can check her out at www.bryn, that's B-R-Y-N, Blankinship, BLANKINSHIP.com, brynblankinship.com. Let's welcome to Beyond the Darkness, Bryn Blankinship. Hi, Bryn.
Hey, Tim. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thank you for being on. You know, one of the things that's actually a couple of the things that has always intrigued us about, especially Dave and I, about the paranormal in particular is past lives and getting to past lives in the spirit world through hypnosis and hypnotic suggestion and the power of the mind. And that's one of the things that I love talking about, and one of the things that I'm going to love digging into your brain about today. And I appreciate, first of all, you taking the time. I know you've been very busy this weekend with a workshop. And let me just ask you right off the bat, do you do a lot of workshops throughout the year?
I do. I do. I teach hypnosis certification, basic, advanced, and past life regression. And then I also host various workshops at my center, the Braith Center. So we have a lot going on at different times.
That's awesome. That's completely awesome. Now, I guess the first thing I want to get to has to do with the mind itself and the power of suggestion. You're going to think this is kind of an odd question to start with, but how do we know with the power of suggestion what is real and what is fantasy?
Well, I'm asked that a lot. And when a client is under hypnosis and I'm guiding the session, mm-hmm. I'm letting them talk. So as they're talking and they're telling me what's happening, I'm asking questions, to find out more about what's happening. And if I say something that is not correct, they will correct me right then and there. So if I were to say, are you in a field? And they're not, if they were in a building, let's say, they would correct me and say, no, I'm in a building. So the fact that I'm introducing a field doesn't make them change what they're getting. If anything, it makes them more adamant about correcting me on what's coming through for them. The other thing, when someone is given a suggestion, if it were as simple as just giving the suggestion to that person so they could change a habit, then I would be very rich, because I could just suggest something to them. They would come in with a problem and they would leave, and it would be resolved right away, right? It goes through a process with the client. They have to go into that deeper space. They have to connect with the information and then change that habit in order to follow that suggestion, if we're talking about habit change. So it's not as simple as just suggesting something and then the client's just going to give over control to the hypnotherapist, especially with transpersonal hypnosis, which is what I practice.
But could it be, now again, we're going to kind of go down this rabbit hole a little bit. Could it be that that it's just that person's, what's the words I'm looking for here? Could it be just that's that person's narrative, that they want to stick to a narrative, or they have a story in their mind that they want to stick to, and they're firm on sticking to this narrative in their head, that they've already crafted the narrative that they want to go with, and you're not going to steer them, much like a will, if you will?
Okay, so that is conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is, as they go deeper, they get into the past life and the information starts coming. That's when they start noticing it's not what they thought. Let's say that a person, they went to a psychic, and the psychic gave them a reading and gave them some information about a past life. And then the client comes in and they want to have a past life session. When they go into the past life regression, we try to guide it back. If they're trying to go to a specific event or a specific lifetime, either because they are aware they've had one, or because there's an issue they're trying to work on. So we're trying to guide them to a past life that could help them understand, let's say, a fear of cats. Because I actually had someone recently with a fear of cats.
Okay.
So they go into a past life, and as they are exploring that past life, they're getting details that they didn't know about when the psychic told them, that information. So they have a general idea, but then they're getting much more detail when they are reading themselves, when they are the client, as the client in the past life regression. And then as information comes up, often they're very surprised that it's maybe not the way they had thought. Maybe they had a few details of that lifetime, but the detail that's coming through is new information to their conscious self now, even though they've lived it in a past life. And it's the missing piece that helps them to understand why they're afraid of cats, why they have allergies to cats, and by reconnecting with it, mysteriously those symptoms go away. So I had a lady recently who she has a fear of cats, and we discovered that she lived a life in Africa a couple of centuries ago, and she tamed elephants and I believe it was panthers. It was some type of large cat. And one day she did something wrong, and the cat instinctively swatted at her.
Okay.
She was a male in the past life,
okay,
and killed her.
Ooh.
And so, yes. So we went into the spirit world, and she met with our guides, and we're trying to work it out and find out, more detail with the help of the guide and the higher self. And the cat came through, and there was a bit of a conversation or a bit of a message that she had. So she had the understanding that the cat did not mean to hurt her. It was instinct. It was just, the cat was just, it was a natural reflex of the cat to do what it did, but it wasn't because it was unhappy with her. But it's not because the cat didn't like her. It's because the cat was reacting to something that she had done. So it wasn't a malicious killing. It was just instinct. But he, in the past life, died because of that.
So walk me back a little bit through this as you're going through the process, because I want to understand the process. You're sitting down with the client, you take them through the beginning steps of the hypnosis. They go into this state. How is it that you hook up with the spirit guide in order to talk to the spirit guide to figure out that this is what the cat did, and how does the spirit guide communicate with the cat?
Yes. Okay. So people are they tend to be kinesthetic, auditory, or visual.
Okay. When
they're under hypnosis. So that means that's how they process information.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're under, we start to guide them back through time, and they may have communications. They may see very clearly what's happening, like a movie that plays out before them.
Mm-hmm.
Or it may come through kinesthetically, where they'll feel what's happening. Or it may come through auditorily, where someone's talking, literally talking in their ear, speaking to them.
Okay.
So just to give you an example, if someone is visual and I'm facilitating the regression, they would say, I see that there's a cat, and I'm working with the jungle cat, training it, feeding it, taking care of it.
Mm-hmm.
A kinesthetic person would say, it feels like I'm working with some kind of animal. I think it's a cat. They would use more descriptive words where they're feeling it. And then an auditory person usually conveys the information by saying, they're speaking to me, they're telling me I work with cats. It's as if someone's whispering the information in their ear to them, and then they're relating it to me. So that's what I mean by the client is reading themselves, because I guide them through relaxation, breathing, with music, deepening techniques to allow the client space to take themselves down into that deeper place of relaxation and connection. And they are letting themselves go. They control their depth. So the more they can follow the instructions, let go, have trust in the process and in themselves, that allows them to go to that space where they can connect to this information that's coming through. So that's what I mean by them reading themselves. I'm not a psychic. I'm not reading them.
Okay.
But I'm asking them questions throughout, and then they're reporting it back to me as to what's happening, and then it progresses along.
You said
the way that no, go ahead.
Oh, you said a keyword there, and that's trust. There are some people, I take it, that are curious about their past lives, but trust is a big issue. I take it when you probably get some people who come into your office that are skeptics or skeptical, but they do want to know about their past lives. How do you break through that barrier of someone who maybe has a hard time giving up that trust or forming that bond of trust with you, that they naturally have those walls up when they come to see you?
Sure. Well, there's a force that starts to take place when they're coming in for the session. I call that divine timing, divine scheduling, where there's a part of them that's ready to receive this information, or they wouldn't have called to inquire. And then when they're ready to actually book the session, they come in and we talk about these things, about auditory, kinesthetic. We start to talk about their past and find out a little bit more about them. I let them know about my background and my training so that they can feel more comfortable with the process and what to expect. And then, they need to understand, and I share this with them when we're scheduling them. My office manager shares this with them, that, they are participating in the process. Because some people have the idea that, it's like a psychic reading, and it's not. I'm not going to read them. I'm not going to give them the information, but I'm going to provide the space so that they can do the steps that are necessary to go deeper. And as it starts to go along, they tend to get more comfortable. They are nervous. They're anxious. Mm-hmm. They're excited. They want to find out. And those are all the things that get in the way, because if you're trying too hard, the anticipation of wanting it too much can get in the way just as much as, the inability to let go can hinder the situation in the session. So the deepening, the relaxation, the music, all of those things are meant to help the client build a foundation. And then as they're going deeper down into time, let's say, and as the session is progressing along, it's building upon each step to take them into that deeper space where they can get out of their conscious mind. Their conscious mind steps back, but it doesn't leave. It's still there, because we need the mind to help to tell us what's happening. The mind is still there, but we're coming from a different part of self.
Okay.
We're coming from the heart. We're not coming from the head. We're coming from a space deep inside ourselves. And once we can get out of the thinking mind and let that step back, the heart emerges, and then it becomes easier to tap into the information. And then once we go through current life, we may go through current life, childhood, may stop over in the womb, may go directly into the past life, or take a direct path into the spirit world through this process. And then as we go there, we meet up with, in the past life, they're able to talk about details of the past life and what's happening. Or in the spirit world, they may meet up with a guide, and then the guide guides them and shares information and takes them places. For soul reflection, the soul advisory council they may meet with, or soul awareness, finding out about themselves as a soul, qualities, traits, characteristics, soul name, soul colors, soul group.
It can really get that deep?
Oh, yes. And that's what's so wonderful, because the client, they read the stories in the books, but it reads one way. And when you're experiencing it, it feels so differently. It's just a wonderful experience to start connecting. And then you can find out all kinds of details about yourself, why you're here. And these things on a deeper level. So when you're rediscovering them, it's like an awakening that takes place, because it's not new information to you. at a soul level, even on a human level. It's just information that is clearer, because you're already recognizing, as you're tapping into that, you're recognizing some of your qualities as a soul that you bring with you for this incarnation.
See, and I can only relate to myself. With myself, in the few times that I've sat down to be hypnotized, and I can only relate to stage experiences and one or two times in an office, and I'll relate both. I rarely open up on the show about things, but I'll open up here. On stage, I was unable to be hypnotized in a couple of different times, and I think it was because, not that I wanted to be embarrassed, or because I have no pride. I'll tell you that right now. I'll do anything for entertainment. I just think it was because I wasn't quite down with the hokey shenanigans. I didn't want to, I just wasn't down with it. So I think it was the trust thing. I had my walls up, I had my guard up. I wasn't about to go for it.
Can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
So you are in control at all times as the client.
Okay.
And the difference between stage hypnosis and transpersonal hypnosis is, with stage hypnosis, the hypnotist is in charge. They need to control the situation. They're doing exercises and games to weed out certain personality types. Mm-hmm. They're looking for the somnambulist. Somnambulists are a personality type that go bigger, better, faster into hypnosis, and they make really great candidates to do that, to be on stage and do that kind of show. They're open and willing, but at the same time, they still have the ability to say no. So the show could be going along, and when they're tired of the shenanigans, they just don't feel like doing it anymore, or if they don't like what they're being asked to do, they will start to drop out. And the hypnotist is looking for those signs so he can have them go sit down before the rest of the audience recognizes this. So let's say you have a crowd of 100 people. If 10% of the audience are somnambulists, you're going to have about 8 to 10 people that are going to make really great candidates to be up on stage. And they do go quickly into hypnosis. They do go under. However, that's different than what I'm facilitating in this type of session. So okay. This is transpersonal hypnosis. And in transpersonal hypnosis, the client holds the answers to the wisdom within themselves. They created the problem so they can also find the solution to the answers. And we have access to infinite information about ourselves as souls in that deeper state, because we're tapped into the spirit world when we can go deep enough through the right process to get there.
Okay. And I'll tell you about the other one here in just a second. But first, and it's a heck of a story, but first, every car comes with its share of stories. That ding in your bumper when you nervously picked up a first date, the luxury package when you got after a big promotion, or the mileage you saved by riding your bike all summer. And while you can't put a price tag on your stories, now with TrueCar, you can at least find out what your car's worth is when it comes time to sell or trade it in. Just go to TrueCar, simply enter your license plate number, and watch how your car's details pop up. Then just answer a few questions. Navigation and moonroof. Watch as they bump up your value. High mileage. Well, you already knew it was going to cost you, but now you know how much it dings your wallet so you can plan ahead. Once you're finished, you'll get a true cash offer sent in minutes that you can take to a local certified dealer to cash out or trade in. So when you're ready to experience a better way to sell or trade in your car, check out TrueCar today. True cash offer, not available in all areas. Welcome back to Beyond the Darkness. Our guest is Bryn Blankinship, and we're talking about hypnosis and talking about contact with the spirit world and talking about contact with your past lives as well. And Bryn, before we took that short break, we were talking about my different experiences with hypnosis, and we had talked about the stage hypnosis, which you were separating between stage hypnosis and the true hypnosis that you do in the office. Here's my experience with true hypnosis in the office, and in fact, I scared my hypnotist. Actually, it was the therapist. It wasn't a hypnotist per se. It was the therapist who used hypnosis in his practice. And he said, I want to use a little bit of hypnosis in therapy. I was going through some therapy with personal stuff. And when he put me under, I agreed to be put under, but I got to admit, I wasn't comfortable with being put under. But I did it anyways. But I said, okay. And I got myself to a point where I was comfortable, went under, and I remember waking up and just, you know how your guts are sore from sobbing, and I had tears streaming down my face, and I didn't quite remember what it was I was sobbing at, but I remember waking up and looking at a plant. I did this big, huge, it looked like a huge tree or fern or whatever it was, and I looked over at the therapist, and he looked at me, and he just, jaw was open, eyes are huge, and he said, I don't think we're going to do that again. And I went, we're not? And he goes, no, whatever trauma is underlying in you is pretty deep, and I don't think we should have done that.
Now, that's what Roger Wolger is one of my teachers, and Roger would have said that's where the juicy stuff is. Mm-hmm. So that was an abreaction. That's where that emotion that's been stuck in there from wherever the event occurred, and it couldn't come out in the moment, that's where it's stuck in there. And sometimes going back through revisiting an event can bring up the emotion from it, and that's called an abreaction. Now, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's just a release. It's an outlet. However, if a client's going through a release and it's to the point where they are sobbing and it's that emotional, you can have them rise above it. They can view the information from a higher place and not have to. You don't have to have them relive it in order to understand it and release it.
Is it dangerous to have somebody stuck in a moment like that and not have them work through it? I mean, is that not a place to leave somebody?
It's my opinion and the way that I was trained to allow the client time to process that, so they can get that out and understand what was happening. There's often therapists, it's my understanding that therapists are trained to avoid that. Maybe not all types of therapists, but certain styles. And, if you move on from it, you've brought it up close to the surface, but then you're not giving it a chance to release. So you're bringing these old feelings up. I believe it's best to give the client a chance to release that, and then you move on with the session.
Because his words...
They usually feel better afterwards.
See, I didn't, because his words were, I couldn't understand what you were saying. He said, I couldn't understand it. He said, the words were unintelligible, as he put it. I didn't understand the words you were saying. They were unintelligible. He didn't make it known whether it was that he couldn't understand the language I was speaking, whether I was speaking English or what it was, but he just said, all I know is that you were just so, you were in so much grief that I had to pull you out, is the way he put it. And that, I don't think we'll do that again was.
And without me being there and knowing all of the details, it's hard for me to say too much about that. But what I would have done rather than pull you out would have been just to have you move forward a bit or move above it. Move above it so we can take a look and find out more. Was this a past life? Was this the current life? Did you somehow spring into a past life? If it's unintelligible because you're so overcome with grief or sadness, you could have been a child. You could have, if I'm sitting here and watching you experience this, I'm trying to find out what's happening. Did you go back to a childhood memory that, has brought up these emotions, or have you gone into another life that we need to look at? If you're coming in for a past life session, I'm purposely guiding you to a past life. You've come in looking for that, and that's where we're headed with it. Most times in current life hypnosis where we're working with issues, most times there's something in your current life that's occurred that you're there to help find relief, change a pattern, and change, tap into and understand more clearly. So I would think yours was current life hypnosis, although the fact that it's hard to understand what you were saying, it's possible you were in a past life. We would need more detail to know that. But if you had been, there's a great opportunity to explore that.
Is it possible that even through just a regular trained therapist that they trip over a past life, not know about it, and they simply skip over it because they're not trained to recognize that it's a past life and then just bury it?
Some. And then others will, when that occurs, will ask questions as if it's current life, the same kinds of questions, tell me what's happening and find out more about it and help the client the same as if it were a current life issue. When these events are occurring, it's important to understand too, when a client is going into a past life and information comes up, that information is coming up for a reason, right? So that is revealing something to the client that they need to see that they were doing before, that they need to see again. Perhaps it's a pattern that they have followed lifetime after lifetime, and they're being shown this so they can break that pattern, like a relationship pattern. Mm-hmm. Or it could be being shown to them because they're unhappy this life with their relationships, and it's showing them that they have had happy and successful relationships in a past life, so it's showing them a way that they can have that again. So that past life is coming up to reveal something to the client in a way that they will understand it. Other times, a client may come in just to have a journey to, they want to know about their past lives. They want to even know if they've had a past life. And we can take them on that journey and find out those details. It's still coming up to reveal something to them about their current life, which they could explore more deeply if they would like to. So when I have that kind of a client come in for a session, I just ask them, what are you looking for out of this session? Where's your focus? Do you just want to explore, or do you want a chance to work through a pattern or something that you seem to have carried over from a past life? Why are you here today? What brought you to my office today?
Let's leave it at that point right there, Bryn, because I have some interesting questions to follow in the next segment. It seems like, and I'll tease it with this, it seems like when we hear about past lives, we hear a lot about, I was so-and-so in a past life, or I was so-and-so, but were we all really somebody in a past life? I'll tease it with that when we come back. But right now, as you know, as Dave's been out on the road and doing his thing on this new television show, we've been airing some of the best segments that we've had as far as Theater of the Mind. And today is no exception. We've pulled another one out of the vault, and here is another one of the best of Theater of the Mind.
The Phantom of the Truck Stop, a real-life encounter with long-haul trucker Mike L. I'm an over-the-road truck driver, and I drive across all the lower 48 states. I see some unusual things from time to time, but nothing compares to what I encountered in Palestine, Arkansas in mid-June of 2011. I was on a long haul from Detroit, Michigan to Houston, Texas. This was day 3 of my trip, and I was beginning to run out of driving hours for the day. I noticed a truck stop gas station on the side of I-40. I pulled off and decided to call it a night. I was running ahead of schedule, so I was going to enjoy a long 14-hour break instead of the usual 10. Off the bat, I didn't like the area, but it seemed I had no other choice. The bathrooms were unkempt and filthy, and they had enough graffiti on the walls to classify itself as an inner-city truck stop, even though I was practically in the middle of nowhere. It was also a small shop, with parking for only a dozen or so trucks. After washing up, I purchased a new work knife, some hot food, and I headed out to my truck. I sat in the captain's chair and listened to the radio while I ate my dinner with my windows down, letting in the dry wind. The Mississippi River had just begun flooding, but there hadn't been any rain in over a week. The surrounding area was beginning to look more like Nevada and less than Arkansas. I finished my meal and cleaned up a bit. I slid out of the seat and onto the pavement with a gust of warm wind that hit me. I strolled over to the dumpster, tossed my garbage inside, and began slowly walking back to my truck. I fished out a filterless cigarette and leaned against the bug-splattered side of my truck and lit it with my lighter. I enjoyed the smoke as I watched the sun set below the horizon. A few more trucks had backed into spots, and I spotted one guy walking out of the store with a bottle of beer in his hand, looking around nervously as he quickly strode to his truck. The life of a trucker. Something interesting and new every day, risking his job over one lousy beer. I climbed back into the cab of the truck, dropped back into the sleeper berth, changed into a pair of pajamas, and I lay down to get some rest. I didn't bother setting an alarm. I just felt sleep creep over me, and I accepted it as I drifted off into dream world. I awoke when the cab of the truck began rocking violently, knocking the bottle of water I had placed on the nightstand over onto the floor. I sat straight up, fully awake. I pressed the button on my truck's radio alarm. It was shortly after 3 a.m. I reached down and grabbed the bottle of water that had fallen and twisted the cap off it. Took a few deep gulps before wondering what had rocked my truck so violently. Then I remembered. The wind. I settled back down, got my heart rate back below 100, and lay my head down on the pillow. The truck rocked again, knocking my ashtray over that I had set in the cup holder, and once again tossing my water bottle onto the floor. I flipped on the overhead light, slid on my shoes, and grabbed another cigarette from my pack. I opened the curtains, sat in the captain's chair, and shut off the sleeper light. I opened the door and noticed that it had cooled down considerably. I shut off the truck, pocketed the keys, and climbed down onto the pavement to look around. At this time of night, the truck stop only had lights around the gasoline pumps, and their light could not reach the truck parking area. I looked around a moment, lit my cigarette, and then I noticed something. The wind had stopped blowing. I wondered what had caused my truck to rock so violently. Maybe an earthquake? I knew that a few had been reported around Memphis, and maybe I was close enough to have felt a tremor. But that rocking motion, it didn't feel like an earthquake. It felt like a wind hitting the side of my truck with a strong gust. Curiously and cautiously, I walked around the front of my truck to the passenger side. I looked down, and there on the length of my trailer, I noticed movement, low to the ground, about 4 feet. Not fast. I used my keys to unlock the passenger side door, jumped up, and grabbed my large flashlight from an overhead storage compartment. I climbed back down and closed and locked the door. I clicked on the light and shined it down the side of my trailer. There was a young girl standing off into the field, about 10 feet behind my truck. And as I tried to look harder, she wasn't there. Well, like I said earlier, truck drivers, we see something new every day, and this was certainly something new. I began to walk toward the rear of my truck, scanning the field with my flashlight for any trace of the girl that I had just seen. When I reached the back, there was no trace. It must have been a trick of my eyes, I thought. Heck, I'm probably not even fully awake yet. I glanced over my shoulder. There were no cars at the pumps, and the clerk definitely hadn't noticed me. That's when I felt the call of the wild coming on, and didn't feel much like walking into the store wearing my pajamas. I mean, I was in the middle of nowhere and no one could see me, so I figured no harm, no foul. I stood at the rear of my trailer and I did my business, looking around again for that girl, hoping that she wasn't hiding behind something and watching me do this. I put everything away, walked to the driver's side of my truck toward the cab. I took the last couple puffs off my cigarette. And then I flung it into the parking lot. I used my keys to unlock the truck, and I popped the door open. Just as I planted my foot on the fairing, I heard a distinct giggle. A girl's giggle. I stepped back down and shined the flashlight around, but still there was nothing. "This is getting kind of creepy," I said aloud.
"He hurt me,"
a small girl's voice answered back. I jumped backward away from my truck. The voice had come from inside the cab. Something was wrong. I had the entire truck locked up, all while I was walking around. There was no way that someone could have gotten in without breaking a window. Now, steeling myself for what was going to be an uncomfortable encounter, the least, I took a step up on the fairing and leaned my head into the truck. "Is anyone in here?" I asked. I then hit the switch to turn on the sleeper berth light. I climbed in. I put a knee on the seat and peered into the sleeper berth.
Good night,
A soft voice said, which seemed to emanate from all around me. I flinched as I heard the word, and I felt a cold chill run through my body. I slid off the seat, stood up in the cab, bumping my temple off the overhead storage bins. I looked around the sleeper, and there was no one there. I turned around and shuffled into the cab to close the door when I saw the young girl standing outside my truck on the pavement, looking up at me with dead, lifeless eyes. Those eyes, you see, they weren't meant for a person. They were designed for a predator, and all of a sudden, I felt like prey. I reached forward and slammed the door shut. I flicked the lock. I quickly decided that I wasn't staying here for the rest of the night. I turned the key and heard my truck's motor rumble to life, along with the familiar and annoying buzzing that was my air pressure gauge telling me that I didn't have enough air to release the brakes. I took a furtive glance out the window, and there she stood, still as a tree, looking up at me and smiling this hideous smile. I didn't want to get any closer to the window until I was ready to get my truck moving. This was wrong, and I didn't want any part of this. That girl, she wasn't human. At least not anymore she wasn't. It was almost as if she was something so inhuman that it had to take on the form of a human. It's hard for me to explain, and I feel sick just thinking about it. I heard the siren shut off and hit the valves to supply the air to my brake system. As the system began to air up, the siren came on again. Oh, screw this, I thought to myself. I have enough to get out of here. I disengaged the clutch, ground the truck into gear, and roared out of the parking lot like the devil himself was behind me, which, for all I knew, he was. I looked in my side mirror as I was about to start turning right, and I saw the girl washed in the red light and the amber glow of my running lights. She was just smiling at me and waving. I flew through my gears as quickly as they would let me, and I got back onto the interstate. I drove for about 45 minutes, repeatedly hitting the switch to turn on my interior lights, to look around the cab and sleeper before finally spotting a larger truck stop at the end of the next exit. After backing into the one of few remaining spots left, I shut off my lights and turned on the sleeper berth light as I walked into the back. Then I paused. At the store, I had bought a souvenir, nothing fancy, just a postcard with a picture of Arkansas on it. I also bought a new knife. I had never even taken the knife out of the box, and I remembered putting the postcard into a drawer for safekeeping. The point of the blade had been driven directly into the spot on I-40 where I had originally stopped for the night. The blade had been driven in deep, pegging the postcard to my nightstand. It took me several minutes just to work the knife loose enough to withdraw it from the nightstand. Thankfully, when I turned the postcard over, there was no message that had been left for me. To this day, I don't know what I saw. I hear other truckers talk of strange things that they see on the interstates, U.S. highways, and state routes, but I never mentioned my experience. I've always felt that just by mentioning her, I'd walk back to my truck, and there she'll be, sitting on my bunk and waiting for me.
Beyond the Darkness listeners, if you like this show, then you're going to love the Laura Ingraham Show podcast on Podcast One. Join Laura as she takes on politics and pop culture with some hard-hitting guests and takes your calls. Download the Laura Ingraham Show podcast every week on Podcast One or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Beyond the darkness.
Welcome back to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm Tim Dennis in for Dave Schrader. Our guest today is Bryn Blankinship, and we are talking about the new book that's out there right now, The Limitless Soul, Hypno-Regression Case Studies into the Past, Present, and Future Lives. We'll have a link to Bryn's book in the description of this show. be sure to look for it in the description and pick up a copy right now. It is out by Llewellyn Press, by the way. We want to mention that as well. Bryn, before the break, I teased that everybody is somebody in a past life, and you can be somebody too. And of course, if you go in for a regression session, everybody expects that they're going to be somebody, Cleopatra or maybe Mark Antony, or not Mark Antony the singer, but Mark Antony, maybe the Roman soldier. It'd be nice to be Mark Antony. I'd like to have a shot at J-Lo too. But is everybody somebody? Have you had the experience of somebody coming in and saying, I really feel like I was Marilyn Monroe, or I really feel like I was JFK, or I really feel like I was somebody, and they come in with a preconceived notion of, I really feel like I was, and that gets in the way of the actual session that you're having. Come to find out that, no, they weren't, but they were really not really anybody at all. Maybe they were just the person who washed King Tut's feet, or they were, they were maybe somebody who served somebody, but not necessarily that person.
Yes. So there are people that will come in for a session, and we talk about this in the pre-talk, and I ask them to set all of that aside and let's allow what needs to come through so we can get a clearer understanding of what that's about, why they have an interest in that time in history or that person, royalty. And when they go into session, often they find out, yes, they were that person, or they were part of that person's court. They may have been a lady in waiting or a knight. So they had an awareness of that time period. They have an awareness of happenings in the castle. The reason they have that awareness is because they were around it. They were not that person. And then there are other times they're able to find out details that help them to see that they were that person. They're able to look up details that they didn't know prior to the session, and it gives them more confirmation as to that person and who they were. But when it all comes down, there's still a soul having an experience in a human body, whether they were royalty or whether they were a pauper on the street. So, and they may go to more than one lifetime in a session. I tend to guide them to one, possibly two, but we have some people that kind of jump around to lifetimes, so we'll not get as much detail of every lifetime, but we'll skim through a few lifetimes, and we'll find out that they might have been both. So they may have had a lifetime as royalty, and then they may have had a lifetime where they were a servant or, a slave on a plantation. And they're learning about experiences by having power and not having power. They also find out that being a royal isn't all it's cracked up to be, because everyone's waiting in line to get your spot. Your relatives, the people that you live with and trust are waiting for that spot. So, they might find out that kind of detail about that lifetime, and it helps put things more into perspective. It helps balance it so that they can see it for what it is. And they might have had a happier life when they had a simpler life.
I've told the story before on the show, and I'll keep it brief. I have an interesting lineage that I didn't find out about until high school. I was in honors history, and I was sitting in Mr. Dahl's class in Blaine Senior High, and I love Mr. Dahl to death. He was a great honors history teacher, a great history teacher, and he kept a wiffle ball bat with him at all times in case you fell asleep in his class. And if you happened to fall asleep and put your head down on the desk, he would walk by. These days, you would never get away with it, but he'd walk by and he would wham, he would hit the corner of your desk and wake you up. And as you woke up, he would say, "Welcome back." But we were learning about the Crusades at the time. And when he would start to talk about the Crusades, I couldn't listen to it, because when he would start to talk about the Crusades and talk about the Knights Templar, I would see a bloody severed head of a Templar.
Mm-hmm.
And I would see it lying in the sand, in the desert sands. And then I would see the helmet with the head still in it, and then I would see through the helmet, like it was my head that was in the helmet, seeing through the helmet, and I would see the actual blood running from under the helmet onto the sand.
Yes.
And
that's an ad reaction.
It unnerved me, and at one point I was closing my eyes trying to get rid of the reaction. And Mr. Dahl went wham right on the side of the desk and made me jump.
No.
And it cleared the image real quick. And Mr. Dahl said, "Mr. Dennis, welcome back." And I said, "I wasn't sleeping." And he said, "See me after class." So I did. And he goes, "What was wrong?" And I go, "I just daydreaming, I guess." And he goes, "What were you daydreaming about?" I said, "Templars." And he said, "Well, at least you were paying attention." I said, "It was nothing. It's just this image of Templars and beheadings and stuff like that. It was just a weird image." He goes, "Oh, that's bizarre." He said, "Were you at least listening?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Good, because there's a quiz tomorrow." And I said, "Well, that's good." So when I went over to my grandparents, we had Sunday dinner at my grandparents every Sunday. It was something that my coming from a divorced family, my grandmother insisted on, that she see her grandchildren every Sunday. I went over and my grandma said, "Well, what are you studying in school this week, dear?" And I said, "Well, honors history, it's kind of interesting. We're studying about the Crusades and about the Knights Templar." And she said, "Well, honey, you have a great grandfather who was the head of the Knights Templar." And I said, I what?" And she said, "Yes, your Grandpa Bernard was the head of the Knights Templar. Your great Grandpa Bernard de Tremolay." I said, "He was?" She said, "Yeah, he lost his head at Ascalon in 1153. And I went, huh? And they sat and told me the story of Grandpa Bernard and how he lost his head and was put on a pike outside the city walls. And it wasn't part of the Crusades, but he was given the city of Gaza to turn around. And yeah, so and from that moment on, I got a little freaked out by stuff like that. So it was kind of an interesting little story, but it begs the question that I'll pose to you: is there such a thing as if someone like me were to sit down in your chair and you were going to do a regression session on me, is there such a thing as DNA memory where if you're going to do a regression on me, am I going to remember my great-grandfather's memory of being beheaded? And it's not so much my memory of a past life, but am I going to remember my grandfather's past life? And am I replaying his movie?
That's a good question, because you do have sense memories that are carried forward from generation in your DNA. Your body has memories stored deep within it. And then your soul brings in memories of all of its lifetimes as well. And it's interesting that you brought up a story about a Knights Templar, because I actually have one in the book where a client went back to a past life, and he was a knight, and it was the Battle of Antioch, and he was bludgeoned in that war, and he died at 30 years old. But he had enlisted thinking it was an honor and exciting to be part of the war effort, because he had been raised to believe that. Mm-hmm. And then when he got there, it was not what he thought it would be. And he was really ready to be out of that life. He was ready to go. And then he went into the spirit world at the end of that lifetime. And, I had him look around. Well, actually, I didn't guide the session, but I have my students, when I'm teaching them to do this kind of work, to ask, look around. Is there anyone in that life that you need to say goodbye to? Is there any unfinished business with anyone? And he said, "There's nobody in my life except for this horse. My horse And so he said goodbye to his horse, and then, his guides took him and worked with him. And I'm not typically in my clients' past lives. Let me just be clear about that. I don't interject myself into their lives. But in the book, the story that I'm sharing was where it was at training, and two of my students were facilitating a session. And I'd come in to check on them, and they were finishing up the session, and it turns out that I had killed him in the past life. I had been in that battle. I was a Turk, and we had gone head to head, and I got the better of him. He got me a couple of blows, but I survived. And here he was again as my student. And, some people have the belief that if you hurt someone in a past life that you have to come back and not get along, but we get along great. I actually work with him now. He helps with my trainings, and, we have a really good rapport despite the fact in that past life I killed him.
Really?
And he would tell you that he needed a way out. In fact, his guide told him that when he got to the crossover, and said you needed a way out, and she, which I was a he in the past life, and he gave it to you. He just needed a way out of that lifetime, and I volunteered.
Interesting.
But also in the spirit world, so he went into the spirit world, and then his guides, they had a lot of information for him about that life, and he tends to have those lifetimes where he is fighting for the underdog. He rebels against the system. There's restriction and all these laws that some of them are ridiculous. They're not helpful to the people. They're more for the leaders. And, the chapter is actually chapter 1. It's struggle, justice, and belief, because he went in thinking one thing, becoming a knight, and came out with other feelings about it. And, he's had a theme that he's worked on through several lifetimes. And then in another life, he was actually a sheriff out in the Wild West. So he was, fighting for law and order, and he lost his life in that one. And I didn't do it.
You didn't do it?
I only know of one. I only took him out one time. Yes.
Huh. But there's a theme.
See, we can laugh about it. If he and I were sitting here talking about it, we would laugh about it, because that's the way it is between us.
But there's a theme there of him fighting for what he thought was a righteous cause and getting taken out.
But he still felt like he did the right thing for himself and his family of origin. But he didn't have a family as an adult. He didn't have a family because he wasn't in the same town long enough to form a relationship and have anyone to go back to after battle. So he was a full-time soldier. But
is the lesson there, the minute he stops fighting, is the minute and seeks peace, is the minute that he changes his mission, or the minute that his life gets better?
It helps him to understand more about why he has some of the beliefs that he has about organizations and, injustices. He's really against injustice and dishonest practices and, organizations that operate like an exercise in greed. And it helped him to understand where that was coming from. And this is just one piece because it's just one lifetime. However, this was a big piece. This was a big piece of that belief. So it helped him to see that in another way.
Interesting. Very interesting indeed.
So I did a follow-up.
Okay.
My student facilitated the past life session, and then I did a follow-up. And I have developed a technique, soul expression, spiritual regression, and working in the spirit world with your guides and your soul advisory council, you just find out more about yourself as a soul. And so we explored that, and we were able to find out more about his beliefs and the carryover, and find out that this was a theme. This wasn't just one past life where he worked with that. It was a theme that's been through several lifetimes. And that's when I found out also about the lifetime in the Wild West as a sheriff. So
did they mention how many lifetimes he he had done this or followed this pattern, or was it just those two, the knight and the sheriff?
They didn't give the number, but there were more than that. And his guide came in to explain that that John is his name that we used in the book. Mm-hmm. All the names have been changed.
Yeah.
But John, that it's his role to come in and combat the dark. He's coming in, he incarnates to work against the dark, and there's lower dimensions mm-hmm. to help communicate truth. He is here. Part of his role is to communicate truth and, help break through perceptions.
And now he's working with you.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome. I'm just wanting to know when you're going to kill him in this life. No, I'm kidding.
We have the agreement we're not going to do that. I'm just teasing.
How are you going to do it? Let me know, Bryn. Is it going to be like poisoning his lunch when he's not looking? Or no, I'm kidding. That's really cool, though. I mean, that you find out that much from. And you said the Soul Council told him this?
His Soul Advisory Council gave him some insights into why he's here. The Soul Advisory Council are those group of beings that are with him, with a person during their incarnation. They help with your pre-planning of you getting here. So you have pre-planning, but you also have free will. So it's like once you get here to Earth, you come in with a plan. But once you're here, you may veer off in this direction. You have free will. You have a free will to follow the plan or not. However, you're coming with a plan, and the goal is to get through these events that you've set up for yourself for learning and experience. Because we plan it on the other side, and then we come down to Earth to see how our plan worked out, and we learn through the human experience. And, you're going to work through the theme, but how you work through it may change depending on what happens when you get there. Like, you have a plan, but when you get there, some of the people that you were going to work with may not, may have changed their contract or their agreement to work with you, right? Okay. Like, if the person was supposed to meet you at a certain time in your life, you were going to run into them, and now they've veered off on this other path, then someone else will come in to fulfill that agreement, but it may not be as planned, or you may change direction. And I'm saying that, however, then it makes me wonder, and this is what I'm exploring through some of my sessions, was it always planned that person was going to not show up for you, so it would cause you to have to change direction? Like, was that part of the pre-planning? Was it meant to be that way all along? I don't know. But either way, you're working on the same underlying theme once you get to your incarnation here on Earth.
That seems like organized chaos. Is difficult. It really seems like organized chaos to me.
It is exactly organized chaos.
Because if things are, because you always hear the expression, well, that was meant to be. But if people have free will, then nothing is truly meant to be. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean,
yes.
Well, no, it's not meant to be, because if I have the free will to walk away from something, then no, it's not. If I choose to walk away from something, well, no, it's not meant to be.
It's meant to be, but maybe not with you.
Right. Then I'm going to put a stop to it. If I feel it's not meant to be, then no, I'm going to put the brakes on it. It just seems to me that well, let's talk about love for a second here, and soul families and following through past lives, because to me it seems like, you say meant to be, and let's connect that for a second here, because it seems to me you hear people say, well, I feel like I've been with this person in multiple lives throughout time, and I met this person and I felt like I knew them from the moment I saw them. And we had
And it could be good, it could be bad.
But yet they get together in this life and boom, circumstances happen where they can't be together, or circumstances happen where they get together, but they're not together very long, or they get together and stuff happens and one decides, you know what, I got this going on over here and I'm going to go pursue this. And or this person over here says, well, I'm going to choose career over you, or different things happen. And again, it's that free will thing. Well, if it's meant to happen and the universe has put you two together yet again, why are we fighting it so hard?
Well, because of all the past lives that you've had together. So it could be lifetimes of loss. It may be lifetimes where you weren't able to be together your entire lifetime, start to finish. Maybe one died early, maybe one died in childbirth, and or one went off to war and died and didn't come back. And then there could be other lifetimes where you didn't connect at all, because one didn't incarnate, the other one did, and experienced a life where they never could really find that special soulmate to connect to, right? Well, because they weren't incarnated. And the soul incarnating gets to experience love from all different sides of it. Love by having love by having lost, having loved and lost, love by what it feels like to have an entire lifetime without that soul. So then you incarnate now, both of you, and each soul is going to remember pieces of their experience. The one that lived that lifetime of loss without that person could be so excited to see that person again, that soul now, and so happy to see them because they lived so long without them. Or it could be in the reverse. They could be a little gun shy because they've been hurt before by the person leaving early, or, going off to war, not coming back, or having to live without them. Mm-hmm. And so they might be afraid to get involved. I mean, it could be so many variables. It's not just one reason that fits everyone, but as we're going through the session and exploring that client is pulling up this information, their guides, their soul advisory counselor helping them along with their soul, and sharing information with them about that and about their lessons around love. And I have a couple of stories in the books about this. It's powerful because you have a deeper understanding of why you're feeling the way you are now about that person in this life.
So is there such a thing as nature versus nurture? Can we fight nature in this? Is it eventually one of those things where you're going to come back to that person no matter what? Or is there truly free will here where you could just stay away from them for the rest of your life and just say, nah, it ain't going to happen and I'll see you next lifetime?
That's where I believe free will comes in, and they can say, no, I'm done. I'm not going to, and so that would change plans if it was planned out that they were to meet up later in life and come together. That could change the plan for the other person. And so speaking of love and soulmates, we have our primary soulmate, the one that we started with. We were sparked at the same time, is how I describe it. Mm-hmm. We started with them, and we've had many, many, many incarnations with them. They are the one. However, they can't be there all the time. And our soulmate could be our child. It could be our partner. It could be a teacher. It could be a business partner. It doesn't have to only be a romantic relationship. They can be all, in different incarnations. They can come through in different ways. They could be our best friend. So we have that one that we were sparked with. However, there are others that will come in. We can have strong, strong feelings about someone that's not our primary soulmate, because we've been with them many times, and we have that agreement that they'll come in a certain way and support us as well. Like a kindred spirit, you meet this person and you're just instantly close, best friends, a romantic relationship, almost, but not quite as strong as a soulmate connection.
So do you believe in the twin flame theory?
What is your take on, what is your description of the twin flame?
That would be more of a romantic thing, twin flame. I'm trying to think of an accurate description of twin flame, which would be different than a soulmate. It would be closer than a soulmate. It would be someone who's got that romantic spark connection, feel like they've almost been separated not separated. What am I looking for here? Words is hard, Bryn.
I know.
You know, a level higher than a soulmate, I would say. Soulmates, like you said, can happen non-romantically. I think twin flames tend to be more romantic.
You know,
almost, and they tend to have almost a psychic sense among them too. I think twin flames do.
Well, in my description of a soulmate, well, a soulmate can be that, but they could also be a person's child. You know, that's where it differs. In my experience in working with clients, a soulmate is not always their romantic partner. And I know there's the twin flame theory out there. It's just that when clients are speaking about their twin flame or their sometimes it gets intermingled in a session, and those, I think it's I want to say it's a matter of semantics.
Okay. See, I would tell you, and again, I'll go with the semantic thing with you, with the child being a soulmate. The reason why, and we can get into this, and we can kind of transition into this as well. The reason why I think I would disqualify a child as a soulmate is because I think you almost splinter a piece of your soul when you create a child. A part of yourself goes into the making of a child, not just physically, but I think a part of you makes up that child.
I see what you're saying. However, a soulmate could have incarnated this time as a teacher or
True.
a mentor.
True.
That's going to, you're going to work. That's going to be instrumental in your life. So they're going to come in this role to play that part. So they could be a child to play that part. Or, I guess what I'm trying to say is you're not always married to your soulmate.
True.
And, but they can come in an instrumental way, but there's that primary one like no other. So we can label it how we want to label it, but there's that primary soul that's like no other. Whether they're your romantic relationship or some other relationship in your life, they were sparked at the same time, and they've come in to they tend to incarnate with you, but you play various roles to help each other in those roles.
I get what
and
you're
it's
saying.
not always romantic, from my experience.
I get what you're saying.
But I also think it's a bit of semantics because, everyone wants that soulmate, that romantic partner, or most people strive for that. And sometimes that partner is there in a different partnership than romantic.
Right. Understandable. Sometimes that what people want in a romantic partner is there in a platonic partner, I think is the best way to put it.
Yes.
Yeah. It makes for an interesting transition in that we talk sometimes about soul splintering. And I know we've talked about it before in the past on the show, but I think I want to talk a little bit about soul retrieval here for a moment when it comes to what you do with hypnotic regression. I've heard it from psychics before, but I know you say what you do is not psychic. But sometimes there are people who feel like they've lost a part of themselves, or they don't feel complete, or they don't feel whole, or something is wrong with them. I know there are a lot of physical ailments sometimes that psychics will say are for the most part because of a piece of somebody's soul is splintered. For example, they could be feeling a huge amount of anxiety, or they could be feeling, something in that matter because they feel like a piece of their soul is missing. And it could be because it's out there in the ether, so to speak, or it's explain to me what soul splintering and soul retrieval is, and if you have anything to do with it in your line of work.
Well, I think you gave a great description of what it feels like for the client when they're feeling those things. So, like a piece of them is not complete. Mm-hmm. And so by revisiting a past life, you can reclaim a part of yourself that maybe you felt cut off from, or, that was kind of hanging out over there. You can reclaim that piece of yourself by revisiting a past life. Earlier in the show, when I was mentioning that sometimes you go back to a past life and you're shown that you had a happy lifetime, a happy existence, sometimes a soul now needs to be shown that they've actually had that before, because they're having trouble believing that they've ever been truly happy, or they're needing to be reminded of what that feels like to feel happy, or to be successful. Maybe they're feeling like they can't achieve some of the goals they've set for themselves. They're having difficulty. So during the session, they go back to a past life where they were very successful in business and did well for themselves, to be reminded so they can bring that back. Or if they lost a child in a past life, and maybe that part of them is still grieving that at a soul level now, they're able to heal that part, so they can put those feelings to rest by neutralizing those feelings. So I kind of look at what I do with hypnosis in hypno-regression as a way of retrieving parts that need to be retrieved, reclaimed, mm-hmm. to feel empowered, or neutralizing and letting go of things that are holding a person back or hindering them from living the full expression of who they are.
You had mentioned, now I need to know how this plays in to soul retrieval and soul splintering. How do guides play a role in it, and who exactly makes up the Soul Advisory Council? This sounds like somebody who makes up PSAs for television, and radio. Well, what exactly is a Soul Advisory Council, and who's on it?
So, a Soul Advisory Council are a group of wise beings that work with the soul. Okay. So we each have a team. And on that team, you have your Soul Advisory Council, you have your guide, you have your soul groups. Soul groups are a little separate. However, the Soul Advisory Council works with the pre-planning of a soul and helps oversee the soul during its incarnation. But it works focuses on the big picture, right? Okay. But the guides work with more of the details. So, I call them Soul Advisory Council. That's what my clients call them. Mm-hmm. They can also be known as the elders, the wise ones, the sages, the wise beings. This is what clients report back to me that they're called as well. Okay. But in my book, I refer to them as Soul Advisory Council, and they work with the bigger picture in the planning. And then the guides help with implementing and the details. So they work with us, and we have more than one guide, but they will work with us on down here in the trenches. While we're down here on Earth, they're helping us give guidance. Now, guides don't tell us what to do, but they will give guidance and they will give suggestions when we ask. When we ask for help, they're willing to help us, but they don't just tell us what to do. we're not down here to be robots and just follow what someone says. We're down here to live and experience, and there is help when we need it from the other side. And these are the helpers that help us and in the ways that they help. Often the Soul Advisory Council are described as beings, not always, faceless beings. Sometimes they're like light, like they're like forms of light, or they may be wearing robes. Often they're described that way, but they can take many forms. And then the guides will show up, and guides can show up like a ball of light, or they can also show up as a being from one of your favorite lifetimes, or a lifetime that you will recognize, that you need to know for that day.
Okay.
So there, in my book, there are times where guides showed up as like a wise sage from ancient times in Asia, like a wise teacher, from that lifetime. Or there was a time where a guide showed up as a businessman in a suit, because my client, he was having difficulty. He had come in for 2 sessions, and after the first session, he didn't tell me this, but he demanded on the drive over that his guide send his supervisor in to talk with him for the second session, because he had a couple of questions that he wanted answered. So during the session, the guide showed up, and he had a trench coat on and a suit, and took the client for a walk in the park to go over some of his answers. And then the client started to realize that he did have a rapport with his team on the other side, or else they wouldn't have accommodated him that way to help him see more clearly what it is he was trying to see. And he's working on the theme of leadership, in his current life and in past lives, where he was a leader in various roles. And I think in his sessions in the book, we went through 3 past lives, one as a school teacher, and I believe one of his was as a soldier, and they were all leadership roles. And what's interesting was the school teacher, she was actually in a nursing home when we popped into that piece of the past life, and she was nearing the end of her life, and she had led groups in church. And she's a Southern woman, and my client was a male, and current life male, and she led groups in church. She led groups for her students, and her life occurred during the time of horse and buggies transitioning into cars, and she had ended up in a wheelchair and had to quit her job early because a car was driving down the street and spooked a horse, and the carriage pinned her up against the wall when the horse spooked, and she lost the use of her leg.
Oh.
So these are the kinds of details that were coming through that, my client couldn't have made that up with the incredible detail that he did. And it all was relevant to why he was being shown these stories, these past life stories of leadership. The theme he's been working on is leadership. And during that, his Soul Advisory Council came in and gave him a robe and wrapped him in it, and told him he was having an advancement to the next level because he had achieved goals that he had set for himself, and now it was time for the next piece. So it was sort of a simulated graduation, but the feelings that came through permeated the room. As I said, I'm not psychic, but I could feel the energy in the room, which I do with my clients. I could feel the celebration that was taking place because he had worked so diligently during his incarnations on this particular theme, and here he was advancing to another piece, to the next level of what he was here for. So they were very happy, with his progress. And that was the Soul Advisory Council that did that, along with his guides who were there too.
Interesting. This may seem like kind of a vapid question, but I have to ask it. I don't know why. It's just overwhelming right now. But you ever had a case that's I don't know why I have to ask it, but I do. I'm sorry, Bryn. Have you ever had a case where you've got a guy who maybe he's overly macho? He's like, oh, I love combat sports. I love this. I love that. I love to watch, guys fight or whatever. And I really feel like every life I've ever had, I've been a guy. And you sit down with him, you go, no, you know what? Here's a life where you were Betsy Ross and you contributed and you made the flag. And nope, impossible. There's no way I could have ever been a woman, especially sewing. I hate sewing. There's no way I could have made the flag. And you're trying to get through to them that, no, you contributed to a very good cause. You made the symbol of our country. You did more for this country than you ever could have realized. You contributed in this way. And you're trying to show the overall scope of what you did, and you did it as a different sex, and you did it in a different gender, and it's okay, and you're trying to teach the overall lesson and get through to maybe this muscle-bound meathead that, just loves combat sports, and he's convinced that he's always been a guy, but, you're trying to convince him that, it's okay to be another gender. Have you ever run into this where you're trying to get through to somebody that it's okay to be that you're gender fluid in either past life, that you don't have to be one or the other. You can be one or the other. You don't have to be one.
So I don't tend to have that type of person come in for a session. Mm-hmm. They don't typically seek out a hypnotherapist for past life regression. But I will put it like this. I have had male and female clients come in, and they've said things like, oh, I'm sure I've only been a male, or I'm sure I've only been female. And then and I say, okay, fine. I mean, I remain neutral. It's not my job to convince. It's my job to facilitate and get as much information as we can. Mm-hmm. And they are very surprised when they find out that they have had a past life as a female, or vice versa, the opposite of the sex that they are now. However, going into the soul level and talking, communicating with their soul, really getting in touch with their soul, because their soul, sometimes they will channel their soul. Sometimes they will start speaking in a different voice that comes through, or other times they're just communicating with their soul and relaying it to me about the conversation. They're communicating telepathically, Mm-hmm. Their soul is explaining the many, many lifetimes that they've had as one gender and why they would choose that, or why they chose the gender that they have now, why they've been female many times and this time they came in as a male, or vice versa.
Here's the other.
Who knows who Betsy Ross has reincarnated as this time?
That's true. That's very true. That's very true. The other one that gets me, and I'm going to throw this one at you too. This is the one that I can never wrap my head around because I don't associate with it, although I will tell you a short story here. When I was younger, when I was probably about 8-9 years old, I was fascinated with stars and planets and astronomy. And I had a telescope, and I used to like to look up at the stars, but I never felt like I had an alien past life. And I've had a couple of, a couple of psychics that would sit around and tell people, oh, you had an alien past life and you had an alien past life. But I had one look at me and go, you've never had an alien past life, and pointed at me and said, you've never had an alien past life. People subscribe to alien past lives or having been on alien planets in past lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you
happens all the time.
Okay, so
another day at the office.
Let's talk about that. Let's get down to the nitty gritty here, Bryn. Why?
This might be a whole nother show.
And it may be, but let's talk about that here for a second, because there are a couple different schools of thought. You do have people out there who are skeptical that there's even an alien presence on different planets, and there are people who truly believe that aliens are out there. They just haven't made their presence known, or they made it known, but they do it in secret in the dark of the night and not in the light of day. What is it that you've come across in your practice that makes you believe that alien past lives are not only possible but have happened, and that we have been reincarnated from alien lives? And what makes you think that these past life readings are credible? And I use that word lightly when I use it, but what makes you think it's credible and not science fiction that's coming from the subconscious?
Well, I would say what makes you think that it's not possible to have had other lifetimes on other planets? And why would we think that Earth is the only place that people incarnate? Now, with clients, there's one in the book that their guide, their soul advisory council came through and was explaining, because there was the question of aliens that came up, and they gave a great description. That's why I used that story. It described it so well, about how when you're incarnating on another planet, you're not an alien because you look like your soul is inhabiting a body that's like all the other bodies on that planet, right? And here on Earth, we all look this way. Within a range, humans look a certain way.
Okay.
So we're not an alien on that planet. When our soul incarnates there, we're just on that planet. But when we're on Earth and we're looking at that planet, if we were to see those beings, we would describe them, again, semantics, but we would describe them as aliens because they are different from us and they live on other planets. Now, I've had clients talk about all kinds of experiences on other planets. There's a blue planet with water, the water world, where they inhabit these other bodies. They communicate with one another telepathically. There are planets that we inhabit where we develop skills. Like, for example, we work with color and energy on these planets. We don't even have bodies on some of those planets. We just are balls of light or beings that are able to play with energy back and forth, and then we come to Earth and incarnate. So you bring in these skills in your birthday suit, so to speak. You bring those skills with you to Earth that you need for that particular incarnation, but they may be skills that you've developed on another planet. So say that you are an energy worker in your current life.
Okay.
Most likely, I'm not going to say absolutely, but most likely, that's a skill that you picked up on a planet where you play with energy, work with your soul group, learning about energy, and now you're on Earth and you're bringing that skill here or tapping into that skill to learn about energy in human form. And, as I was saying earlier, Earth is the emotional planet. We come to Earth knowing that it's going to be difficult because it's emotional. And when our loved ones die, we're cut off from them when they pass until we pass, and then we move on to the other side. On other planets, when you pass, and then you're right there again, in a different way than you are here on Earth. But those energy workers and those psychics and those gifted souls that bring those gifts in for this current incarnation are learning to bridge that gap. They are able to be incarnated now, yet tune into those other places through those skills that they've developed. Or like music, when you have a gift with music, it's often something that's developed in another place. These other planets have different vibrations and different frequencies to them and different learning experiences. And let's take this a step further.
Okay.
We're aware of our galaxy, but what about outside of our galaxy?
We're becoming more aware of things outside of our galaxy with these different telescopes that we're we're developing. Hence the picture of the black hole that we just took this past week. So we're slowly becoming more aware of things that are outside of our galaxy. And I put that precursor there slowly. It's not something that we're rapidly learning about. But I guess up until now, we hadn't known what was outside it. So it's hard to say, from my point of view, I can't say to you, well, Bryn, I can't tell you, unequivocally, words is hard again, that there's nothing there, that I cry foul at any of that. I can't prove anything. Well,
I had a lot of these questions myself, right?
Oh, yeah.
And, I was taught, I learned it from a lot of the great teachers. Mm-hmm. Michael Newton, Brian Weiss, Roger Wolger, these are my teachers. Mm-hmm. And they taught me to come from a neutral place and ask questions mm-hmm. and don't leave, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And so when my clients, things would happen in session, and then my work started to evolve. And that's why I now call it the Sessor session, soul expression, spiritual regression. It's a form of spiritual regression that takes you into that soul state, and you have access to this information. And as clients started popping into that state, into different places than I had been aware of, or their guides would come in and talk. There was one time that a guide came in. I'm making notes during the session because I'm trying to keep up with what's happening, and I may go back to something and want to follow up later in the session, because these sessions are a couple of hours long. Some of them are 2 hours long, some of them are 4 or 5 hours long. And then if you do the Sessor session, you've already done the past life with me. So we spend, 6 or 7 hours together between the two sessions. Okay. And there was one time that this guide came through in this, the client did not have a voice like this. This booming voice came out of the client and said to me, "Bryn, put your pen down. We'd like to talk to you." Well, I put my pen down. I was shocked because that had never happened. And then they said, "We want to share some information with you while my client was going through a healing process." Okay. And they were sending some energy work to the client, and they wanted to share with me some information. And then they said, "Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask?" So, I took that time because I don't use my clients' personal time session to ask personal questions that I have. But I had some questions about things that were relevant to what was happening in that client session, and then some of the inner workings of the spirit world. And then each session has given me another piece of that puzzle and a glimpse here, and helped me to formulate some things that I had questions about. So, I don't have all the answers. I'm not trying to say that I do, but I have a deeper understanding, having done sessions with clients for 18 years, 17 years, mm-hmm. Exploring this. And then, with each session and with each client, you get more information. And then, also, some clients are more fluid in that state. Some clients are able to tap into more information, where other clients are tapping into energy. So it's not as much about the words. It's more about the energy download that comes through by working in that state. It's just really, really powerful. You can feel it in the room when they're experiencing this. And when they're coming out of the session, their eyes are bright, different. Their spirit looks lighter. Yeah. Also, I mentioned the guide speaking, but sometimes the soul will come through and speak too, and they'll speak to me about the client in the third person, which is amazing, because the client is sitting there talking about themselves to me, but it's not the client, it's their soul, and they're sharing information that the client needs to know, or that will help me ask the client more specific questions, that will help them for their reason for coming in. Or sometimes the soul will just share, this is why we brought this client in today for the session. Here's why we arranged that.
Let me ask you this. You said that you got the opportunity to ask a question of that big booming voice that came forward to you from the spirit world. What was the burning, one of the biggest burning questions you ever had to ask the spirit world that you had to know?
There's so many. And over time,
I mean, when that voice comes through and hits you, Bryn, and says, you know,
I was shocked.
When you have,
I was shocked.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, if God came down from on high, or whatever makes up this universe comes down from on high in the spirit world and says, you know, put your pen down, you know, we want to talk. I think if we all were hit with that voice and said, well, we have questions. Do you have questions, or bring us your questions? I think we all of a sudden would have questions off the top of our heads. What question did you pose?
Well, I was asking questions to explore a soul's existence and why we, you know, deeper than the training that I'd been given, deeper than sessions that I had worked with up until that point. And they were explaining to me, that was actually the day that my session started to shift. Because up until that point, that had not happened. And so I asked questions about a soul's existence, you know, when we incarnate, and finding out about our useful purpose as beings, because each soul has a purpose when they incarnate. Each of us has a purpose as to why we're here. Even when we don't think we have a purpose, or even we're not consciously aware of it, we still have a purpose. And maybe our purpose is to not be consciously aware until there's a time we're going to wake up and be aware. But those were questions that I was asking. And then it was explained to me that my work would be shifting.
Okay.
And not to worry, that they would be working with me. So they come through with information, but sometimes it you know, it's not specific. They don't give the details of the how. They kind of let you know that things are happening, and then it sort of takes care of itself and it plays itself out.
They love to be vague, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so now in hindsight, I can see, you know, what was being explained to me, but it was more that the client needed that time just to be in that space, that healing space, and they were taking that opportunity to let me ask some questions and to share with me a little bit of what was coming. And this is where I learned, you know, a little bit more about pre-planning and free will. But at the same time, you know, earlier in this interview, we were talking about how there's there's words again.
Yep, words is hard. Yeah.
Pre-planning, and then we have free will, and, you know, just trying to understand how much free will do we have. You know, I mean, if we come down here and we waste the purpose of our coming, we're going to have to come back again and work on that theme at some point, you know. So I can't really put a number on it, but souls come in wanting to work towards their goals that they've set. However, they do have free will. They can get distracted. You know, bright, shiny things can throw them off path a little bit.
True.
You don't usually go that far off your path. We can, but not, you know, there's some,
something will put you back on the track is what you're saying.
Yes. Sometimes, okay. I know. When I was asking those questions, it was explained to me that sometimes the long way is actually the short way. So you might think that the direct path from point A to B is going to get you there. And if you just stay on that path, that's going to get you your spirit points and get you to your goal, right?
Right.
And then you feel like you've done something wrong because you've taken all these twists and turns and you didn't follow that path that your mind said you had to do. Well, by taking the twists and turns, you might actually get there a little faster, because the long way can be the short way in the long run. That's what that guide said to me once I got over the shock of that.
Because the long way actually taught you the lessons you were supposed to learn in the first place.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
And this work is about trust, not just being in a session, but the work of a soul being here on Earth, on this planet. It's about trust, tuning into that guidance, having faith. You're going to face challenges, you're going to face obstacles, but knowing that you have that team on the other side for support, knowing that you're not truly alone, even though there might not be another single human around you at the time, helps you to move forward and stay connected, to your purpose and to why you're here. So it's not blind faith, because things will happen and you'll start to recognize that divine hand in guiding you to that place and the events that led you there. And it will make you smile when you realize that you took a windy path, but you got where you wanted to be. It just showed up differently than what you expected. However, what you got was even better than you could have imagined.
There you go. I think that's a good place to leave it. The Limitless Soul, Hypno-Regression Case Studies into Past, Present, and Future Lives is the name of the book by Bryn Blankinship. Bryn spells her name B-R-Y-N. Blankinship is B-L-A-N-K-I-N-S-H-I-P. You can actually look her up at brynblankinship.com. We have a link to both her website and to where you can check out the book on the description of this show. I encourage you to go get the book. I encourage you to go check out her website and check out some of the workshops that Bryn has available as well. Bryn, this has been fascinating, and I tell you what, maybe in the future we'll dig into alien past lives too. I know that seems like a whole show in itself. I know we glossed over it, but that's a topic for another show. I did want to kind of joust a little bit with you, but I think we could take up a huge amount of time with that, and we'll do that in the future.
Thank you. I would love to. And, in the book, we cover, each chapter has past life sessions and assessor sessions that I worked with clients. And the assessor is giving that current life assessment, where they're at in their current life that can help them move forward. Mm-hmm. There are also exercises at the end of each chapter. So there are things that the reader can do. Maybe they can't get in for a session right now. But in the meantime, there are exercises they can do to start helping them connect to their own soul and start listening for those signs that their soul is guiding them with and to.
That sounds awesome. Well, yeah, then definitely people pick up the book, get a copy. And again, we'll have links for the book on the description of the website. And by all means, pick it up and then contact Bryn and get in for a session. That sounds like a wonderful thing. And you never know, Bryn, you may see me on your doorstep sooner than later. And I have plenty of past lives, I'm sure, that will curl your hair.
Well, I would love it. If you're ever out here in Wilmington, North Carolina, come on out.
I may need a trip to North Carolina after all this snow.
Exactly. You need a trip to the beach.
Yeah.
You can go down to the beach and reflect on the session afterwards.
I think so. I've had it up to my ears in snow. So thank you very much for joining us, Bryn. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. All right, folks, that'll do it for this week for Beyond the Darkness. Again, join us again next week for all new supernatural news. Dave will be back next week. And again, True Crime Tuesday. We'll be back on Tuesday. If you don't know how to sign up, just go to darknessradio.com. Click on the banner with Scully in the top hat or actually the fedora and coat, top coat rather, or the you know what I'm talking about. It's the banner for True Crime Tuesday. Sign up, only $5 a month. You've got 2 years worth of shows to go through. Be sure to check that out. Only $5 a month. And that gets you all those archives and brand new episodes every Tuesday, and Dumb Crimes and Stupid Criminals. Have yourself a little laugh at other people's dumb crime expense. You can do that as well over at our Patreon site for True Crime Tuesday by clicking on that link. As well, darknessevents.com. Check out where Dave and I are going to be around the country to come on out and get a hug from us, and check out some paranormal experiences as well around the country. You can do that by going to darknessevents.com. In the meantime, we will see you right back here next weekend on the best in paranormal talk radio. This has been Beyond the Darkness.